So, hello everybody, good afternoon. This is our final Lunch with Nonprofit Leaders series event. And we have Dirk Butler here, the Vice President for Community Impact and Engagement at the United Way of the National Capital Area. So Dirk, I want to start out with a few questions about the United Way and your collective impact work. So while our students will almost certainly recognize the United Way name, they may not yet be familiar with the organization's mission or its work. Can you please give us a brief overview of what the United Way is and your organization's major priorities right now?
Sure, without question. First, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. I think with United Way, we've gone through kind of a period of growth, and we've actually gone through kind of a model change, right? And so, you'll often hear folks refer to the old United Way, which was really around focused on a lot of volunteerism, giving through us to other organizations, things of that nature. And while we still do some of that, without question, it's always going to be kind of a staple of who we are. And I think important work, right? We're also really begun to branch ourselves out into collective impact work as well as equity. We understand just because of the times that we're in, but also because of the imperative of working in an equitable manner to not only work with folks the right way, both internally and externally, but to also get to and maintain outcomes, we have to have an equity focus. And that's equity in all its frames, whether it be race equity, whether it be gender equity, whether it be economic equity. We understand that this has to really guide all of the work that we do, and we have to look at our work through an equity lens. So we've really been taking the past year or so to really make sure we're able to do that, and we're stepping into that space authentically. And to that end, we about 5 years ago, we started a community commitment that we termed Community Commitment 1.0. And that work was really around working with the community and working with our partners and our different community stakeholders and funders and donors to kind of ascertain what was happening in the region and what we needed to work on and focus on as a United Way, right? And where we need to work with our partners to help provide our resources to lift up the great work that was already happening out there in the region. And we landed on three particular buckets of work. The first bucket is education. The second bucket is economic opportunity. And the third bucket was health. And so the education work is really a mixture of a community schools initiative, which is really around providing wraparound services for folks, young people and their families, to be able to help them better navigate their lives with the hope that that would actually help young people be more academically successful. If you don't have these stresses in your life, like meeting basic needs, and we're helping to provide those and helping to work with the family to provide those, then you'll be able to more focus on your academic achievement. But the other part of that work is really also around evidence-based programming and social-emotional learning, and really working with young people to help them transfer some of the challenges and risk factors of becoming a young adult. And so we're working with the middle schools and our high schools very, very soon to implement both of these initiatives. The health work is really around trying to focus on healthy mind and body. We're working with the NFL partners and various corporations to provide healthy, not only food security, but also physical activity for our young people. And then we're also working with Talkspace, which is a fantastic organization that provides access to mental health services and mental health practitioners in the virtual space. And as you can imagine, post-COVID, that's going to be something that's going to be extremely important. And so we're working with them to provide that for vulnerable populations, specifically those that don't often seek the professional and mental health that they may need, right, because of stigma or because of lack of access. So we're talking about African-American men, we're talking about the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ plus community, we're talking about veterans. So really wanting to work with these vulnerable populations, these marginalized populations, to begin to seek the help they need. And then, of course, our economic opportunity work, those of you who are familiar with our financial empowerment centers throughout the region, which provide free tax preparation for folks, financial literacy, financial empowerment, entrepreneurial services for the community. We're looking to really expand that work and include workforce development in that model as well, because we understand, again, post-COVID, there's going to be just a lot of folks that are going to be out of work, a lot of folks that are going to need to be connected back to work. And so working with our corporate partners and entities and our government entities to actually help our financial empowerment centers become full stop workforce development centers as well.
Cool. Thanks for sharing what you guys do. I'm really interested personally in your community schools initiative and also the social emotional learning. I know those have been overlooked areas in the education, using quotes, education reform movement. But having worked in public schools previously, I just know how important it is to care for the whole child and to be able to set them up for success in the classroom. You have to be able to attend to all their other needs as well. So it's awesome to hear that you guys are leading collective impact work around in that area. I read that one of your major, and I want to talk more about collective impact because I read it's a major interest area of yours, and it's reflected in the work you've done throughout your career. You've been involved in multi-sector partnerships that invest in healthy child development. And so I'm curious, based on your experience, what do you believe makes for successful partnerships across sectors between government, nonprofits, community organizations, maybe for-profit businesses as well? What makes for these effective partnerships?
Well, I think the first step is willingness. You have to have a willingness on the part of all parties to want to be involved in a partnership like that. Those types of partnerships are, from my experience, are always very complicated, just being very honest, because folks usually have competing priorities, right? So wanting to be willing to come to the table and really see the importance of putting a particular population, whether you're talking about young people or whatever population you're trying to improve their life challenges, is extremely important. So that's the first thing. You have to have willingness, and I think that willingness needs to be facilitated by a strong champion, right? In collective impact work, we always talk about you have to have the champion, right? The champion that's able to go into these different venues and go to these different entities and really, basically galvanize folks, right? And so I think the champion is important. The willingness is important. I think the data is important. I think folks often overlook the importance of data. Often you see different entities see themselves in the data, right? So if you're talking about, for instance, an initiative that involves schools and businesses and elected officials, well, everybody's, can see themselves in young people doing well, right? Businesses know that if schools are doing well, that attracts folks to that region to want to live, and they know that folks in that region want to live there are going to want to buy. Elected officials understand that schools doing well is connected directly to votes, right? They understand that. Community members obviously want to see their young people do well. That's a huge important factor for them. And schools, of course, know that they're judged on how well their young people do. So I think finding the data that resonates with everyone is a huge part of trying to build a collective impact table, right? You have to have that thing that folks see themselves in, and data is a really huge part of it. I think the last really important ingredient is, I think, time. Understanding that things are a process and that these types of tables don't happen overnight, right? You have to be able to put the work in. You have to be able to build trust, build a clear governance structure, a clear communication structure. All these things are extremely important to bringing about a successful collective impact table. And so I think time is often a part of the work that folks overlook, because they usually try to launch these initiatives so quickly, right? And want to get them off the ground, up and running. We always hear people, let's get it up and running. But you have to put the time in to build those foundational aspects, like the governance structure, the trust, the decision-making process. All those things have to be built over time so that you're going to be successful and that you have the proper foundation for a strong collective impact table.
Cool. All right, so you've set the collective impact table. There's got to be a champion. We need the right data. I mean, we need an emphasis on data and also finding the right data. And then we need an understanding that it's going to take time and that it's a process. So can we zero in on an example, like a particular partnership that you've been involved in that was especially effective? Curious, like, what organizations were there? What was the work and what was the outcome?
Yeah, so part of my interest has always really been around evidence-based programs. I feel like they are just a fantastic conduit and really do a lot of what I just said in terms of people seeing themselves in the data, seeing a clear understanding of what the challenges are, a clear solution, time to put into the process. Like I think evidence-based programs are strong. And so one of the initiatives that I was very fortunate to oversee was when I was at the Annie Casey Foundation a few years ago. I was able to to oversee a collective impact initiative called Evidence to Success. And Evidence to Success was really the brainchild of the foundation. It was really ingenious in a lot of ways, because what it did was it said, hey, look, we understand that young people have risk factors. We know that there's certain things that they struggle with, right? This is just a part of being a young person. We know folks that usually have a lot of supports, high economic status, parents that make a lot of money and things of that nature, live in a certain community, usually have the type of supports and protective buffer factors that prevent those risk factors from overtaking them. We also know through research that folks that don't have those levels of supports, they usually struggle much more because they don't have those protective factors. So what if we were to take some evidence-based programs that address the risk factors these young people are experiencing and provide protective factors to help buffer against that risk? Would they become successful? And so, and even more so, could we inundate a community with a variety of evidence-based programs that do just that, based upon the needs of those young people in that community? And so it's kind of with that premise that they created, Annie and Casey created Evidence to Success. And mind you, we're trying to duplicate some of that in the region with the work I'm doing with United Way as well. And I think we're making some strong inroads in that regard. But it was a collective impact table because we realized we couldn't do this alone. Like, we couldn't, as a foundation, come into a region and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We had to make sure that we had buy-in and support from the community stakeholders that were there. So some of the folks that were at the table, first we had to get that champion. You always start with that champion. It's usually a community-based organization that has a lot of cachet, a lot of respect within the community, like in United Way, right? So we've worked with United Ways in the past. You go in there, you have to find that champion. But then through the networks that champion has been able to create, we also had to have the school system there, because obviously that's where the young people are. We had the faith-based community, because again, that's where families are, right? We had the community residents themselves. We can't leave them out because they're an important part, an aspect of this. Oftentimes people leave them out of the collective impact table, even though the whole initiative is about improving their lives. And so they're experts in their own lives. So they need to be a part of that conversation and that decision-making process. Elected officials, in places that I've been with this initiative, we had the mayor on board. We had a variety of different councilmen and women on board. So they were very important. And then, of course, the business community, which was more than just a funder, right? They also helped in a lot of ways in terms of, providing the supports and the information, getting that out to folks. They played a vital role in that as well. And then also just provided a really strong synergy between the business community and the community at large. And it really helped to heal, I think, a lot that normally goes on between those two communities, right? So we really had a variety of different folks. Oh, and the other piece that I think we often forget is the public systems, right? So in addition to the school system, which is a public system, we also had child welfare. We had juvenile justice was at the table, the local juvenile justice organization, local child welfare organization was at the table, Department of Housing was at the table. And that's why I always say, Charlie, the importance is really around seeing yourself in the data, because all those entities saw themselves in the data. Right. And what does that mean by that? Well, the educational system saw themselves in the data with these young people without question, because they were like, well, we're charged with educating them, and we have to look at their attendance, their behavior, their coursework, etc. But violence, right, or misbehavior affects, let's say, for instance, the housing department, right? Because if these young people leave the school because they've been suspended or they've gotten into trouble or they drop out, well, where are they going back to? Right? And they're going back to these housing developments, and they're getting into trouble, and they're having activities that may not be beneficial for themselves or the environment around them. And so they have a vested interest in seeing schools do well with young people. But no one pointed that out to them before, right? And then once they heard that, they were like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we do have a vested interest. So we need to invest in the school. So now you have the housing department investing in the school, right? Child welfare and juvenile justice got on board, and they said, wait a minute, if we can prevent these young people from coming to us in the first place, we can improve our numbers. Kids that we don't see are improvements in our numbers. So we need to invest in the school too, because many of our referrals come from the school, right? And so we can invest in the school, maybe we can quell some of this coming to us upstream. And so you begin to see how everybody through the data begins to see themselves in it and where they can make inroads in their own numbers. And that's what really becomes like the galvanizing force around an initiative like Evidence of Success.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like when all these organizations are coming together to combine resources and expertise and human capital to collect, to come together collectively to benefit children and families, that sounds like a huge win for
No question.
society.
It's a win for everybody, exactly.
Yeah, it's a win for everybody. But we don't hear about these types of initiatives that often. So what could go wrong? What gets in the way of these efforts?
How can I say this diplomatically? I think sometimes ego, right?
Ego, okay.
Yeah, because sometimes, when you have initiatives like this, who really made the change, right? Was it the schools? Or was it the funding the housing department gave? Or was it child welfare, juvenile justice? Like, who made the change matters to folks more than I think we often like to admit. I think agencies working together that haven't normally worked together is also a challenge, right? The housing department usually, like I said, doesn't work with school systems. So not having a defined process can be difficult because, again, public systems work by processes, right? They tried and true processes, some of them existed for hundreds of years, right? And so any disruption to that feels a bit foreign, right? I think not having a strong partner is another challenge. And when I say partner, I mean lead agency. Again, you have to have that champion, and that champion has to be, it's almost like a unicorn in a lot of ways, because not only do they have to be respected in one arena, they have to be respected in all arenas. All folks have to know them, and all folks have to trust them. And so that can be very difficult finding that type of an entity in a community that has a good relationship with public systems, elected officials, schools, community, and is trust about all of them. That's really a challenge. It's really a challenge. And so I think those are some of them. And of course, I think the biggest one is funding, right? I mean, I think, these types of initiatives they're not inexpensive, right? They do cost. And now you usually get a huge bang for your buck, right? But you have to show a lot of that in cost benefit analyses. Like, so for instance, how much money do we save juvenile justice by preventing young people from going into that position in the first place, right? So sometimes it can be difficult to get the type of funding you need to be able to support these efforts and these endeavors, even though it's been proven, very strongly by research that these types of initiatives prevent so many issues and challenges happening for public systems and other entities that they ultimately save them money. But to that end, funding is still a challenge oftentimes.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for, I guess, shining a light on this type of work and how it can go well and what can get in the way. I think a lot of our students are interested in being parts of initiatives like this and very interested in the issue areas that you're talking about as well, especially child welfare. But I want to shift the conversation in the last 10 minutes or so to try to glean some leadership and career advice from you for our students. So you have a graduate degree in social work. You founded a think tank called the Opportunity Institute. You worked in the federal government and for a major foundation, as you mentioned, the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And now you lead community impact and engagement at the United Way. So what have been some of the key decisions that you've made that have guided your career and brought you to the point that you are today?
Yeah. So I would say to folks that and it may sound cliche, but it's really real. It's not about position, prestige, or any of that. It's about what do you want to learn and when, right? It's really about taking positions and being courageous enough to take positions, right, that are going to teach you and are going to stretch you and are going to challenge you. I think that's important because what that'll ultimately do is help you understand where you want to be and what you want to do, and help you understand the contribution that you bring to the table. I think that's really important. I've had the opportunity to, as you mentioned, to be in some really fantastic places that had their unique challenges, right? Their unique challenges and their unique benefits. And I just tried to embrace it all. I tried to really just learn from the things that were great and learn from the things that weren't. Right? I think that's really gives you a really clear understanding of what it is and who it is you want to be as a professional in this space. I think that's extremely important. So when you when you go out and you actually try to engage in endeavors that are going to stretch you, once you're there, be open to receiving everything that you're going to get, the challenges as well as the opportunities as well.
That's really interesting, because I think in a way it's sort of counterintuitive. I think a lot of people think when they apply to a job, you're expected to have the answers for that job. But it sounds like what you're saying is you need to come in with curiosity and be willing to learn and stretch. Did you portray that when you were interviewing for different positions throughout your career, like a humility and like a eagerness to learn?
Yeah, without question. I think employers, prospective employers appreciate that. I think, you coming in saying I got all the answers is the quickest way to signal to people that you do not have all the answers. Okay. You couldn't possibly, because you're not here. Like, you haven't seen so many of these answers to questions and challenges that organizations are going through are contextual. So you have to get in and learn a place, learn what's happening, talk to everyone, no matter where they fall in the organizational structure or the organizational hierarchy, and really understand what's happening before you even profess to say we're going to move something forward or implement this idea or this innovation, because you don't know what's happening, right? And that information is the most important thing. Like, oftentimes organizations struggle because they lose institutional memory. Folks that know what's happening and have known what's happening for many years leave, and it's tough to reproduce that level of wisdom. And so when you enter an organization, you need to take advantage of all of that, not only for the role you're going to play in the organization, but also for your own personal growth. The most I've learned has been from folks that I've worked with. I have a friend that just became a CEO, and I asked him, well, how did you get on this journey? And, and you've been a successful CEO, so how did you do it? And he basically said, I just did it. I learned while I was there, right? I did not come in with all the skill sets I needed to be a successful CEO. I learned by doing, right? And folks were there to mentor and teach me and hold me not only accountable, but also support me. And so that is how I learned through time. And so I think that's the biggest thing I walked away from that conversation. I've tried to apply it to my own life. You don't expect to have all the answers. I didn't have all the answers when I got married. I didn't have all the answers when I was a father, became a father. I just learned. I learned by doing, and it was open enough to accept the challenges and the triumphs, as well as the failures and the successes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. My last question, and then I'll invite Olivia back in to facilitate our Q&A, is if anybody here, if anybody watching the recording wants to get involved with either the United Way's collective impact work or other initiatives like this in our region, especially like during COVID, it seems like it's harder to find maybe it's harder to find volunteering opportunities for some types of work, but in general, whether it's for a job or to volunteer or to donate, where can we send people who want to get involved in these efforts?
Yeah, definitely. Please go to our website. I think that's the best way to do it. We have a plethora of information there. It's www.uwnca.org, United Way National Capital Area, and or Google us, and they'll pull us right up. Please join our movement. I think we're, as I said earlier, not just on a programmatic journey. I think we're on an equity journey. And it's fun to do that. We have something right now called the 21-day challenge, or 21-day journey rather, which is really a race equity journey of over 21 days, where folks get for every day, they get information, they get articles that provoke them to think about a particular topic around race equity, right? And so it's just been exciting to be a part of this type of a journey with an organization that has the courage to kind of shift in this manner. So we'd love for all of you to join us and to come on that journey with us. So please just visit our website or Google us, United Way National Capital Area.
Cool. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for the conversation, for answering all my questions.
A pleasure, definitely.